The events of September 11th, 2001 were, well, our source material calls them the most incredible and cinematic attacks in American history. And that really captures something, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The visual impact was just immense, unforgettable.
Exactly. And even now, more than 2 decades later, the ripples, the effects of that day, they
Yeah.
continue to shape our world. You see it everywhere.
Absolutely. International policy, security, even just, public trust.
And for many people, the story isn't settled. There are still questions, persistent ones for some. So today we're embarking on a deep dive. We're going into an area that's often, let's face it, shrouded in contention. Lots of passionate debate.
Uh-huh. You mean the rumors, the conspiracy theories surrounding 9/11?
Precisely. The enduring ones, some quite sophisticated.
Sure.
We're going to carefully explore how these theories first popped up, where they came from.
And why they took hold so strongly in certain circles. That's a key question.
It really is. And also, what do the experts say? We've got insights from intelligence analysts, engineers, all sorts responding to these claims.
Right.
We've gathered a lot of material, articles, research, expert views, aiming to give you a comprehensive and hopefully a clarifying perspective on this huge, impactful subject.
And our mission today, just to be clear, is really to navigate this landscape. It's incredibly complex, often very emotionally charged, as you said.
Definitely.
So using our sources directly, we want to help you, our listener, gain a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding, not just of the theories themselves, but also the evidence, what's presented for them and what's presented against them.
That's crucial. We're not here to take sides.
Absolutely not. Not endorsing any specific viewpoint. Our goal is just to impartially dissect the arguments we've found in the source material.
Lay it all out.
Yeah. Present the evidence as it's given to us, and ultimately just encourage a process of rational, critical reflection, because this topic has profoundly impacted our collective psyche.
No doubt about it. And it still shapes public perception, global conversations today.
It really does.
Okay, let's get into it then. Part 1. The lingering echoes of 9/11. An introduction to these conspiracies. So let's unpack this first point. Our main source, written back in 2014, it's nearly 13 years after the attacks, mind you, observes something striking. It says, the rumor still runs, 9/11 would only be a machination. A machination. That's a really strong word, isn't it? A loaded term.
It is. It implies something far more deliberate than just, say, a rumor or a mistake.
Exactly. What does our source really imply by using that word? And who are these theories usually pointing the finger at? It suggests something hidden, sinister.
Well, machination immediately conjures up this image of a deliberate, complex plot, doesn't it? Orchestrated by hidden actors.
Right, not just an external attack.
Exactly. It goes way beyond simple incompetence or even negligence. It points towards a secret agenda, meticulously planned by unseen orchestrators.
A complete subversion of the official story.
Precisely. That what we were all told, what we saw, wasn't the real story at all, but more like a carefully constructed illusion designed for some darker purpose. And our source, quite wisely, I think, emphasizes the incredible and cinematic attacks themselves. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
That sheer visual and emotional power. It was so profound, so unlike anything seen before. It almost made the event ripe for these dramatic alternative explanations.
Because it was just so hard to comprehend.
I think so. When something is that shocking, that devastating, the human mind really struggles to accept a straightforward explanation, even if it's horrific.
So people look for something else.
Some do, yes. They seek a more elaborate narrative, maybe one that feels more intellectually satisfying, even if it's conspiratorial. It's like trying to find order or control in absolute chaos.
Looking for the puppet master behind the curtain.
When the reality might just be a tragic convergence of failures, yeah.
So if the theory is it's a machination, a fabricated reality,
Yeah.
who gets accused of pulling this off? It must be a wide range of suspects.
Oh, absolutely. The opinions on who supposedly orchestrated this alleged machination, they vary hugely, and our source maps this out pretty clearly. Most commonly, the accusations point towards the Bush government at the time and the American military-industrial complex.
The idea being they benefited from it.
That's the underlying logic you often hear, the belief that these groups inherently profit from conflict. So the attacks become, in this view, a convenient excuse, a pretext.
A pretext for war, for more defense spending.
Exactly. Enriching those with vested interests in military and security sectors. It feeds that narrative of profit derived from tragedy.
Right. Who else gets named?
Well, sometimes the Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, gets added to the list. Unfortunately, that can sometimes tap into older anti-Semitic tropes that tend to surface in conspiracy theories.
A recurring theme, sadly.
It can be. And then if you go into the more, let's say, fanatical corners of these theories, the blame shifts again
To who?
to an even more shadowy globalist entity, like a secret Illuminati type group.
The New World Order idea.
Precisely, their alleged goal. Imposing this New World Order, a globalist agenda aiming to control humanity, reshape society entirely.
These are massive accusations.
They are, and they tap into really deep-seated feelings. Distrust of authority, fear of unseen forces, this belief that powerful, often malevolent elites are secretly pulling the strings behind global events.
It's fascinating how that old Roman legal idea, cui bono, who benefits from the crime, seems to immediately turn the suspicion inward for many of these theories.
It really does.
Our sources show that for many conspiracists, asking cui bono leads straight to this profound distrust, not just of specific actions or policies, but of the very institutions of power within the U.S.
Fundamental questioning.
Yeah, a fundamental questioning of who really stood to gain from such a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And for many, the answer they arrive at points right back to the American government itself.
Suggesting the ultimate culprit would be the very system claiming to protect its citizens.
Exactly. It's not just questioning the event, it's questioning the entire structure of power. So you had this spark of suspicion, this cui bono question. How did these complex, elaborate ideas actually spread? How did they find such a big audience? It surely wasn't just whispers.
No, definitely not just whispers. It was really amplified by the digital networks that were emerging then.
The internet.
Exactly. For most people, that first brush with 9/11 conspiracy theories wasn't from a book or a lecture. It was much more modern, much more casual.
How so?
Our source says it often came through a few YouTube videos, clicked randomly from a Facebook status or a tweet.
Wow. Just stumbled upon.
Pretty much, which powerfully illustrates the immense reach, the rapid spread capability of social media and video platforms. They can disseminate anything, misinformation, so quickly, so informally.
And that casual discovery, clicked at random,
Yeah.
that often comes before any deeper looking into it.
That's typically how it starts, yes. It's rarely a deliberate investigation at first. More often, it's like tripping and falling into what people call the rabbit hole.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. Our source specifically flags Loose Change, that documentary by Dylan Avery from 2005.
Ah, yes. Loose Change. Very influential.
It calls it the first internet blockbuster. I mean, that's a huge claim for what was essentially a student film. What impact did it actually have? How did it propel Avery into what the source calls the firmament of buzz?
It had a massive impact. Our source describes watching Loose Change as having an almost, an electrocution effect on people, a real jolt.
Electrocution. Why?
Because, as the source puts it, Avery's demonstration is immediately striking, and the implications it presents are just colossal.
So it felt convincing, powerful.
For many viewers, yes, it wasn't just another documentary. It was framed as this profound reorientation of reality. It offered a compelling, very emotionally charged narrative that directly challenged the official story.
How did that?
Through clever use of dramatic music, selective interviews, carefully edited footage, it constructed a powerful argument, even if it was highly curated and, many argue, deeply flawed.
But it felt like uncovering a secret truth.
To millions who watched it, absolutely. It felt like a hidden truth being exposed, a revelation that radically changed how they saw the world.
And its spread online was key.
Totally key. Its rapid, viral spread across those early internet platforms showed the unprecedented power of this new medium. It bypassed all the traditional gatekeepers, journalists, academics, news outlets.
Straight to the audience.
Directly. And it created this instant, decentralized echo chamber. It really transformed how information or misinformation could travel.
So, okay, someone watches Loose Change. Their interest is definitely piqued.
Yeah.
What happens next in this digital world?
Well, our source points out that if you then search something like 11 September or 9/11 conspiracy on Google,
Or get flooded.
you're quickly submerged in conspiratorial references. Everything. Forums, blogs, more YouTube videos, articles claiming to be scientific, even associations of pilots and engineers claiming to advocate for the truth.
So the internet, this amazing tool for knowledge, also becomes this breeding ground.
It can, yes.
And our source makes that fascinating point about platforms like Wikipedia getting us used to instant answers. But something like 9/11, it needs real reflection, right? Why is it so tough to grasp through instant answers?
Well, that really describes the classic rabbit hole phenomenon, doesn't it? Initial curiosity, sparked maybe by a video, leads you deeper and deeper into this echo chamber of similar content.
And the truth they claim to offer is dramatic.
Extremely. It's presented as this massive crime. The murder of 3,000 Americans and the establishment of liberty-eroding measures to allow the war in Iraq to recover its oil.
Painted as the crime of the century.
Consistently. And the internet, which was initially seen or sold as this instrument of liberation,
Yeah.
it paradoxically becomes an instrument of alienation in these situations. Its whole model of instant gratification, quick answers on Wikipedia, short video explanations, it fundamentally clashes with the sheer complexity of 9/11.
Because 9/11 isn't simple.
Not at all. It's layers upon layers, intricate geopolitics, the physics of collapsing buildings, complex intelligence operations, and just the tragic human element of error and misjudgment on a huge scale.
Instant answers can't capture that.
No way. And as our source critically notes, the digital environment, with its profusion of flashy videos, is certainly the most tempting option.
Easier to consume.
Right. But for the reasons study of a too passionate subject, the internet is a danger and no longer provides a clear-cut answer.
And once a theory like this gets traction online,
Our source says, ominously, nothing can stop it. It becomes self-reinforcing. A feedback loop where every search seems to validate the initial suspicion, making it incredibly hard to challenge or dislodge.
so with all this stuff swirling around online, it seems inevitable that battle lines would get drawn pretty clearly.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Our source material defines two main opposing camps. First, the truthers derived from truth seekers.
Right.
But, as the source points out quite sharply, they don't seek the truth, they already think they know it. Their main goal seems to be spreading their version, not really questioning it.
A fixed narrative, essentially. And on the other side, you have the debunkers. Our source links that term to the German word bunker, implying their goal is to dislodge truthers from their conspiratorial positions.
Like trying to get someone out of a fortified bunker.
Exactly. And that setup immediately shows you how hard any real dialogue is.
Because the starting points are so different.
Completely. If one side thinks it has the truth and the other sees its job as dismantling those beliefs, it's not about shared inquiry anymore. It becomes ideological combat.
Even the labels themselves, truthers, debunker, they sound adversarial from the start.
They really do. They create this instant binary, this us versus them dynamic, reflecting just how polarized the whole debate became. Less a search for common ground, more a clash of worldviews, each side convinced it's right.
And our source describes the online fights between these camps. It says they confront each other tirelessly on forums for nearly 13 years.
Wow, 13 years. That's dedication of a sort.
And tellingly, both sides accuse the other of the same things, being dogmatic, sold out, and/or anti-scientific.
The classic projection.
It paints this picture of a really disorienting online space. You're caught between arguments that sound strong, maybe,
Yeah.
but then it descends into just insults.
Yeah.
What does this intense, often nasty online environment tell us about sharing information today, especially on these really high-stakes topics?
Well, zooming out, it really highlights a huge challenge for critical thinking in our digital age.
How so?
Our source is very blunt about it. It notes that insults are never far away, as are accusations of Nazi and pedophile, which shows how quickly these clashes devolve into ad hominem attacks.
Moving completely away from facts.
Totally. It describes going into these forums as disarming, either because the arguments and counter-arguments are so relentless they make your thought oscillate, you don't know what to believe, or, more generally, due to the ambient level of stupidity where rational discussion just goes out the window.
So it's hard to make sense of anything.
Incredibly difficult for someone genuinely trying to understand. When emotional arguments, personal attacks, unverified claims replace reasoned debate and evidence, well, the ability to make sense of things just crumbles.
It points to bigger issues.
Definitely. Information literacy, digital civility. The internet's anonymity and speed often foster this aggressive, unproductive discourse instead of real intellectual exchange. It creates echo chambers where beliefs get hardened and genuine questions get shouted down.
And crucially, this isn't just some abstract online debate. Our source is chillingly clear. The stakes of believing these theories are incredibly high for society.
Yeah.
It's not just pixels on a screen.
No, the gravity is immense. Our source hammers this point.
Hmm.
It would not be very serious if the implication of 9/11 conspiracy theories had no importance.
But they do.
They absolutely do, because 9/11 was a traumatic and historical event of fundamental importance. That statement really underscores why these theories aren't just harmless curiosities or abstract exercises.
They carry real weight.
Immense weight. Because of the nature of the event itself, nearly 3,000 lives lost, geopolitics reshaped, our sense of security shattered, and the profound consequences, personal and societal, of believing or disbelieving them.
It touches everything.
Our understanding of reality, our trust in government, institutions, even how we approach national security.
Our source lays out a really stark dichotomy, a choice between two terrifying
It
realities.
does. It's very powerful.
It says, if truthers are right, then the world we live in is just a lie, and those who govern us are murderous madmen who absolutely must be severely condemned.
A horrifying thought.
And conversely, if truthers are wrong, as many are, it means that a certain part of the population has totally lost the sense of reality.
Equally disturbing in a different way.
These are incredibly strong statements. They really force you to confront the implications. What does happen to a society if a big chunk of people loses a shared sense of reality, or genuinely believes their leaders are murderous madmen?
And that's precisely where it moves beyond intellectual disagreement into a serious societal problem. Yeah.
The source highlights that buying into 9/11 conspiracy theories almost mechanically implies adherence to a whole host of other, often dangerous ideas.
Like a gateway.
It points to that pattern, yes.
Yeah.
Accepting one huge conspiracy opens the door to others. It can build into this comprehensive worldview based entirely on suspicion, paranoia, distrust of almost all established institutions.
Science, media, government.
Pretty much everything. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop of disbelief.
And this connects to a bigger point, doesn't it? This slippery slope.
Yes. It demonstrates how initial doubts, maybe even understandable ones, can gradually morph into this broader, more corrosive rejection. Rejection of established institutions, expert consensus, rational discourse itself.
And the source gives examples of these dangerous ideas that often tag along.
It does, including things like denial of democracy, morbid suspicion of science, primary anti-imperialism, hatred of others, and an obsession with Israel.
Wow. That's quite a list.
And the explicit link to these broader, often extremist and divisive ideologies makes the whole phenomenon particularly worrying. So the source stresses trying to make sense of things.
Yes, trying to establish an interpretation of the facts as non-dogmatic as possible, and critically, recognizing the underlying thought mechanisms that lead people down this path.
It's not just what people believe, but why.
Exactly, and understanding the ripple effects of those beliefs on their worldview, how they engage as citizens, their basic relationship with society and shared reality. The fragmentation of truth itself becomes the real danger.
Okay, so to really make sense of things, to give a balanced view, we first need to acknowledge some things, right? Some
Yeah.
of the criticisms or unsettling aspects of the official story that might genuinely fuel doubt.
Absolutely essential. We can't just dismiss everything if we want genuine understanding.
Our source is pretty careful about this. It cautions against dismissiveness, noting that truthers are often extremely caricatured.
Right. It acknowledges that while there might be, integral madmen, genuinely extreme individuals in those ranks.
It's too easy to just label everyone that way.
Exactly. That's a crucial distinction. And it sets the tone for this deep dive, too. The source explicitly says, condescension, moralizing, and mockery have never been effective methods of communication and argumentation.
That's fundamental. It has to be about respectful inquiry.
Trying to understand the roots of skepticism, even if you ultimately reject the conclusions, dismissing people or mocking their questions often just makes them dig their heels in further.
To me, it's a barrier.
A huge one. So we have to start by acknowledging the nuances, the complexities.
And our source is surprisingly candid. It lists several points that could understandably fuel skepticism, even if they don't prove a conspiracy.
Like what?
Well, it points to Bush's indecency in sanctifying the attacks and immediately calling for war from a cathedral. That rubbed many people the wrong way.
I can see that.
It also directly addresses the CIA, calls it a secret criminal organization, largely above the law. Often guided by this principle, our source labels abject, the principle of raison d'etat.
Raison d'etat, state reason.
What is that exactly? And why is it significant here for breeding distrust?
Well, raison d'etat is basically the doctrine that a government's national interest, especially concerning state security or survival, can justify actions that might otherwise be seen as illegal, unethical, even morally wrong.
The state plays by different rules.
That's the idea, that it has a unique moral calculus. And our source points out this isn't just about 9/11, it's a general reality for intelligence agencies everywhere, including our own, as it says.
That inherent tension, state power versus ethics, it breeds suspicion.
Naturally. Especially with covert operations functioning secretively, people inevitably question transparency and morality.
What else does the source acknowledge?
It admits that some figures in politics and the military-industrial complex always wished for a new state of fear and a new war.
Why?
Because such conflicts polarize power and are hugely profitable. The source makes that chilling observation. The $4 trillion of the Iraq War were not lost for everyone.
Speaks volumes.
It also acknowledges American imperialism as a historical fact, and that there were troubling connections between America and jihadist groups during and after the war in Afghanistan.
So these are all valid points of criticism.
Yes. Valid criticisms of government actions, historical patterns. They don't prove a 9/11 conspiracy, but they absolutely create fertile ground for distrust. They can make people more receptive to alternative explanations when something huge like 9/11 happens.
These are uncomfortable truths.
Complex, uncomfortable truths that fuel genuine, non-conspiratorial skepticism, too.
Okay, so we've covered the geopolitical and ethical grounds for skepticism. Let's pivot to the technical questions.
Right, the collapses, the crashes.
Because these are often the entry point for doubt. Our source says the initial technical questions truthers raise are understandable. Things about the World Trade Center collapses, the speed, the neatness, the symmetry.
And the Pentagon and Shanksville crashes, where the planes seem to just volatilize.
Yeah. As the source says, it's not every day that 3 buildings are wiped off the map in a few hours, and that planes seem to volatilize. That visual is powerful. So, are these valid starting points for asking questions?
Absolutely. This is a crucial point the source makes. The visual evidence of 9/11 was truly unprecedented, deeply shocking. It naturally led to profound, legitimate questions about how such things could even happen.
The speed, the symmetry of the collapses.
The apparent pulverization of the planes, these things defied common sense and experience.
So the questions are understandable.
Yes, the understandable nature of the questions is key. It validates that initial instinct to question, to seek a deeper understanding. It separates genuine inquiry from the conspiratorial answers that often follow.
It's one thing to ask, how did this happen?
Exactly. That's a fundamental scientific and investigative question. The critical leap, though, is interpreting those questions as automatic proof of controlled demolition or a government cover-up.
Rather than seeing them as complex, unexpected consequences of extreme circumstances.
Which is what many experts argue they were. The challenge is distinguishing between a valid question and jumping to a predetermined conspiratorial answer.
Okay, so we've acknowledged those understandable seeds of doubt, the legitimate concerns. Where do the experts turn to provide the non-conspiratorial explanations? How do they tackle these specific technical and geopolitical questions?
Well, our source emphasizes that a huge number of respected people, authors, journalists, investigators, scientists, sociologists, historians, have meticulously dug into every aspect of 9/11.
A lot of research out there.
A vast amount. And while their focuses might differ, their approaches are consistently described as more structured and rigorously researched compared to the often chaotic discussions online.
They rely on evidence.
Yes. These experts, through years of work, collectively offer a cohesive, evidence-based counter-narrative. They don't ignore uncomfortable truths, but they ground their findings in verifiable data and analysis.
Let's start with the geopolitics and intelligence failures then. That's often twisted into conspiracy.
Right. A great example is Fabrizio Calvi's work, 11 Septembre, La Contre-Enquête. September 11th, The Counter-Inquiry.
What did he find?
He painstakingly traces the geopolitical roots from the Soviet-Afghan War right up to 9/11, and through extensive research, counterinterrogations, examining tons of documents,
His conclusion.
he unequivocally concludes 9/11 was organized by al-Qaeda. But, and this is crucial, he adds a nuanced insight. He argues the attacks were only possible not because of internal government help, but because of stratospheric incompetence by agencies like the FBI and CIA.
So not complicity, but massive failure.
Exactly. He doesn't just accept the official version blindly. He actually reveals U.S. agencies were aware of various threats, but only partially in fragmented
That
ways.
makes a distinction.
A critical one, often missed, knowing attacks might happen versus having the actionable intelligence and coordination to actually stop them. Those are two very different things.
And he details the failures.
Painstakingly. Successive American failures. The crippling ravages of inter-service competition. Turf wars. He even exposes some unrecommendable connections between the CIA and alleged al-Qaeda agents from past operations.
Wow, what's his summary?
It's powerful and precise. If in the United States there was a conspiracy, it was one of incapables and imbeciles. The American terms of the 9/11 equation include only two variables, incompetence and bureaucracy, and one constant lack of imagination.
A conspiracy of incapables.
Yeah.
That's a really potent counter-narrative to a deliberate government plot. It completely reframes conspiracy.
It absolutely does. It shifts the focus from intentional malice to profound systemic dysfunction.
And these expert accounts provide a believable explanation for those intelligence failures that truthers often cite as proof.
Precisely. Instead of deliberate wrongdoing, these sources consistently point to deep systemic problems. Bureaucratic infighting, massive misjudgments, communication breakdowns, a fundamental failure of imagination within the agencies to grasp the threat.
So the why shifts from evil intent to institutional failure.
Which is still deeply troubling and had catastrophic results, but it's a fundamentally different category of explanation.
Are there other experts who support this view?
Yes, several. Tim Weiner, in his book Legacy of Ashes, digs into the CIA's history and its often explosive relations with the U.S. government.
What does he reveal?
Innumerable and barely believable agency failures throughout its history, sometimes bordering on total amateurism, even an unbearable contempt for human life and its methods.
He explains why these happened.
Yes, he dissects the CIA's operational modes, exposing patterns of inefficiency, flawed decision-making, and he doesn't spare the Bush administration either, criticizing its follies, stupidity, and naivety leading up to 9/11.
But despite all that criticism,
His conclusion is the same. The attacks were tragically inevitable given the circumstances and indeed a production of al-Qaeda.
and you mentioned there was even some ignored foresight. That's chilling.
It is. It underscores that theme of systemic failure. Our source mentions Russ Travers, the coming intelligence failure.
Who was he?
A CIA agent himself who wrote this visionary article back in 1996 predicting a catastrophe for 2001.
Seriously, what did he blame?
The CIA's total inability to understand the world, a scathing internal critique years before it happened. Weiner cites it as foresight that was tragically ignored.
And Travers didn't resort to conspiracy theories.
No. His analysis explained why future attacks were likely without ever resorting to the variable American conspiracy.
Any other corroborating sources?
Ali Soufan's The Black Banners. He was an FBI agent who interrogated al-Qaeda members. His chilling investigation reaches the same conclusions as Weiner and Calvi.
So multiple independent, in-depth investigations.
Exactly. From different angles, geopolitical, historical, operational, first-hand experience, all converging on al-Qaeda as the orchestrator, enabled by profound intelligence failures and bureaucracy, not an inside job.
The evidence points to a failure to connect the dots, not a deliberate plot.
That's the overwhelming conclusion from these detailed accounts, yes.
Okay, let's switch gears to the economic motives often brought up. The link between 9/11 and the Iraq War, specifically the idea about Iraqi oil.
Right, a very common element in many theories.
It's undeniable, as our source acknowledges referencing outlets like The Guardian, that the Bush administration had indeed lied brazenly about weapons of mass destruction to justify the Iraq War. That's historical fact.
It is a very significant and controversial fact.
However, our sources make a crucial distinction. They stress that it has never been shown that 9/11 would have been a manipulation to lead to the invasion of Iraq.
A critical separation.
And the source poses that very logical question. If the goal was Iraq, why would they have designated Osama bin Laden as the mastermind of the attacks and not Saddam Hussein?
It highlights a major inconsistency in the conspiracy narrative.
Exactly. So while the WMD lies and oil interests were definitely part of the Iraq War story, our sources clearly separate that from 9/11 being staged to start that war. The evidence just doesn't connect those dots conspiratorially.
It really forces you to critically examine the alleged motives and how coherent they actually are. It's a divergence from the narrative that tries to neatly fit everything into one malicious plot.
And does subsequent evidence challenge the oil motive, too?
It does. Journalists like Sean Cochran and Tim Arango, cited in our source, showed something important.
What's that?
That Iraqi oil, in the years following the war, is not today primarily exploited by Americans as the truthers' logic would have it, but rather by the Chinese.
That directly contradicts the theory.
It directly refutes a central economic motive proposed by many conspiracists that the U.S. engineered 9/11 to grab Iraq's oil for itself. The reality of who actually benefited economically later on just doesn't fit that narrative.
Any other sources on this?
Greg Muddett's book, Fuel on the Fire, he openly acknowledges the involvement of major oil groups in the Iraq War. That's not disputed.
What?
Crucially, Muddett states that at no point does he mention a conspiracy having caused 9/11 to provoke this war.
So these investigations dissect the economics of the war.
Meticulously. But they consistently show these factors don't implicate 9/11 as a manipulated trigger event. The timelines, the identified 9/11 perpetrators, the actual economic beneficiaries, they just don't align with the conspiracy claims.
It's separating valid criticism of war policy from unfounded claims about 9/11 itself.
Exactly. A crucial distinction for clear thinking.
All right, now for the technical questions. These are often the most visually compelling and the ones that really hook people initially. The WTC collapses, the Pentagon, Shanksville.
Yeah, the how could this possibly happen questions.
Our source mentions numerous scientific groups publishing articles specifically to set the record straight, apparently angered by the approximations and technical falsehoods spread by truthers.
Yes, these are vital investigations that tackle those visual anomalies head on. For example, Popular Mechanics magazine,
What did they publish?
a big feature, debunking 9/11 myths. They brought in engineers, architects. Through detailed analysis, they demonstrated unequivocally that the towers did indeed collapse following the crashes and fires, and not because of a supposed controlled demolition.
They explained how.
Yes, detailed engineering and fire science. How the unprecedented heat from jet fuel fires, combined with the severe structural damage from the impacts, led to progressive, catastrophic collapse, not demolition.
Were there other studies?
Jesse Badel and colleagues, publishing in Fire Protection Engineering, showed something interesting.
What was that?
That while 9/11's scale was unique, the collapse of large buildings due to fires is in no way a first. They provided historical examples of other large buildings failing structurally after intense, long fires.
So it wasn't physically impossible, just unprecedented in scale.
That was the context they provided. Extreme conditions, not extraordinary means like demolition.
What about NIST, the official investigation?
Even James G. Quintier, a top fire safety expert, argued that while the official NIST conclusions are probably not entirely exact in every tiny detail, which is normal in complex forensics, there's still no need to resort to conspiratorial theories to explain the collapses. He acknowledges science evolves, refinements happen, without invalidating the core finding about the collapse mechanism.
Okay, what about the Pentagon? That's a big focus for many theories.
Right. The Pentagon Building Performance Report by Palm Lackard and his team tackled that directly.
Their conclusion.
Conclusive, based on overwhelming physical evidence. It was indeed an airplane that crashed into the Pentagon.
They refuted the truther claims, like the no-plane debris idea.
Meticulously. They confirmed debris was indeed recovered, as were the black boxes and carbonized passengers. Tangible, undeniable evidence contradicting claims of a missile or something else.
What about that book, L'Effroyable Imposture? That argued against a plane.
Thierry Misson's book, yes. Our source explicitly states its approximations have long been dismantled, despite misleading photos that circulated widely.
The evidence says.
Our source states unequivocally, based on evidence, it was indeed a Boeing that hit the Pentagon.
It sounds like these scientists and engineers felt a real professional duty to counter the misinformation.
Absolutely. A profound sense of responsibility. Our source also mentions Julian Martin's novel Ground Zero.
Novel.
It blends fiction with what's called a brilliant scientific, political, and sociological essay. Martin is an engineer in physics.
And he covered everything.
WTC, Pentagon, Shanksville, the wars, Bush, New World Order theories, the lot. And through rigorous scientific analysis described as implacable and at times exhilarating,
His conclusion.
9/11 was indeed fomented by al-Qaeda. His work is described as the viewpoint of an engineer exasperated by the nonsense uttered by truthers.
So looking at the bigger picture, these technical analyses directly address the anomalies.
Directly and specifically. They don't dismiss the questions. They offer concrete, evidence-based explanations using physics, engineering, forensics, without needing a hidden plot.
And the details, like debris and black boxes from the Pentagon.
They directly refute persistent claims, providing tangible, verifiable evidence against the speculative narrative. It's about robust, peer-reviewed explanations for incredibly complex, unprecedented events.
Okay, beyond the facts, the expert analyses, there's this whole other crucial dimension. Why do these theories appeal to us?
Yeah.
On a deeper psychological level.
Ah, yes. Moving from the external events to our internal processes.
It's not just about what happened, but how our minds process something so huge, so traumatic.
That's a critical shift. The source says it's also important to speak of the sociological and cognitive components of conspiratorial theories.
Understanding the why behind the belief.
Exactly. How the human mind grapples with these complex, unsettling realities, and why certain stories gain such powerful traction, seemingly regardless of the evidence. It's about the architecture of belief itself.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, psychologically speaking. It's not just facts, it's our brains. Our source brings in several insightful thinkers here. Gerald Bronner's Democracy of the Credulous explains how it is possible to sink into the purest paranoid and pathological delirium.
Strong words.
And others like Campion Vincent and Taguieff detail the mechanisms of alternative thought for those who fall for conspiracy theories, old or new. But Michael Shermer's point in The Believing Brain really stands out to me. He argues the success of these theories is totally uncorrelated with their absence of foundation in reality.
That is profound observation.
What does that tell us about human psychology? Why are we drawn to these narratives even if they aren't true?
It tells us something fundamental, I think. The human mind craves patterns, explanations, especially when facing trauma, uncertainty, or just sheer incomprehensible scale.
Conspiracy theories offer that.
Often, yes. They provide a compelling, deceptively simple narrative that seems to bring order to chaos, even if it's a false order.
And that feeling of understanding is satisfying.
Deeply satisfying for some, having figured it out when others haven't. It lets you bypass the discomfort of complexity, ambiguity, the terrifying randomness of tragedy.
It gives you a clear enemy, a clear story.
Exactly, even if fabricated. Shermer's point underscores that the cognitive appeal isn't about factual accuracy. It's about fulfilling deep psychological needs for control, for certainty, for meaning in a scary, unpredictable world.
And cognitive biases play a role.
Oh, definitely. Confirmation bias, seeking info that confirms what you already think. Availability heuristic, vivid things like a dramatic video seem more true or common. These biases create mental echo chambers.
Reinforcing the chosen story.
Regardless of evidence to the contrary, yes.
And our source warns this isn't just some harmless mental quirk. There are real dangers.
Very real dangers. Antoine Vitkin's The New Imposters shows how the ideas conveyed by these theories represent a potential danger for society.
How so?
He argues the internet, by liberating the speech of madmen, fosters pathological doubt, which paradoxically leads not to critical thinking, but to irrational belief.
While giving a dangerous feeling of certainty.
Precisely. And this is a serious consequence. If you become so convinced of a grand conspiracy that you absolve the actual perpetrators.
You blind yourself to real threats.
Exactly. It's a dangerous certainty when it's built on fiction. Vitkin makes a specific, powerful point about this.
What's that?
He explains that by totally deresponsibilizing Muslim fundamentalists of their crimes, if you decide Al-Qaeda was innocent or just puppets, it risks totally obscuring the very real threat of Islamism as its own violent ideology.
That diversion of blame has consequences.
Potentially catastrophic ones. It could even, he warns, incite terrorists to more violence by removing accountability and understanding of their real motives. It shows how these theories can directly harm national security, distort public understanding, divert attention from real dangers.
We focus on internal plots and miss external threats.
A dangerous complacency born from false insight, yes.
Stepping back again, there's this broader psychological explanation from Michel Onfray in his Anti-Manual of Philosophy.
Ah, yes. Onfray's perspective. Very insightful.
He argues that believing these theories simply stems from the fear of intellectual void. The fear that comes from just not comprehending the attacks.
The void of understanding.
Yeah. His theory is that the irrational, the simple, complete conspiracy story, it plugs the breaches made by reason.
How does reason make breaches?
By doing its job. Science, history, geopolitics. When they pursue objective truth, They often destroy comforting illusions, like the idea the world is simple, peaceful, controllable. That leaves a void.
And the conspiracy fills it.
That's Onfray's argument. When faced with something as incomprehensible and terrifying as 9/11, the mind struggles with that void.
Huh.
A conspiracy theory, no matter how wild or untrue, offers a complete, simple framework. It fills the gap, provides a sense of control.
And a semblance of peace, even if based on falsehoods. Humans, he says, will fabricate from scratch an irrational world, like a new world order pulling strings that's easier to inhabit because it's simple.
It provides false knowledge, but feels comforting.
Exactly. This deep psychological search for simplicity and control in a complex, scary world is a huge driver behind why conspiracy theories endure.
That really does make a lot of sense. It adds such a deep layer to understanding this.
It's a powerful insight into that human need for meaning.
And interestingly, the author of our main source material, Maxence Cranford, he went through a similar process of questioning himself.
He shares that personal journey, yes.
He writes, quite candidly, like everyone, I imagine, I doubted after seeing Loose Change.
Admits he was affected by it.
Totally. He says he was initially shaken but excited by this undeniably charming theory, which speaks to its power, right?
Absolutely.
But that reaction made him decide to dig deeper, not just accept it.
Good for him.
And he stresses this was not done in a day. It took him several years of research, going through everything from forums to videos, from websites to sociological essays, to reach his current view.
And his conclusion after all that.
Definitive. There is no conspiracy, except that concocted by the madmen of Allah. And he knows this view will inevitably draw animosity from truthers. He anticipates the pushback. That's a really powerful personal story. Many listeners might connect with that feeling of initial doubt.
For sure.
It highlights that figuring this stuff out isn't instant. It's a journey, often a long one, of intellectual wrestling, not just flipping a switch.
And the fact he still expects animosity after years of research? It says a lot about how entrenched these beliefs are and how hard constructive engagement can be.
Which brings us to the author's main goal in writing the piece.
Right. What was he aiming for?
Cranford acknowledges it's almost useless to try to change the minds of truthers once they're fully committed.
A pragmatic view.
So his unique objective isn't to win over the convinced. It's to attempt to lay rational foundations, to fuel the reflection of those who are still sincerely asking questions.
The disoriented citizen, as he calls them.
Exactly. The person who hasn't fully landed on a narrative and is genuinely trying to understand amidst all the noise.
He even mentions another work.
Yeah, Confessions to Next Truther by Mike Metzger. He says even if its authenticity is debated, the words used seem very representative of that way of thinking and encourages people to read it.
That distinction he makes between trying to convince the entrenched believer versus guiding the genuine seeker, that's critical for our deep dive here, too.
Absolutely. His goal mirrors ours.
Providing a reasoned basis for reflection, fostering critical thought, not just issuing dogmatic statements that shut down thinking.
Exactly. It's about empowering your critical thought listener, not telling you what to believe.
Laying out the sources, dissecting the arguments.
Giving you the tools to make your own informed decisions based on comprehensive, vetted information. It's really a call to intellectual responsibility.
Well put.
Okay, let's wrap up. Today we've done a deep dive into the really complex, often very contentious world of 9/11 conspiracy theory.
We sure have.
We started by tracing their origins from those initial suspicions, fueled partly by just how cinematic and incomprehensible the attacks felt, to their rapid spread online, boosted by things like Loose Change.
Then we looked at that passionate, often ugly online battle between truthers and debunkers, highlighting how hard rational discussion can be in those spaces.
We then really dug into the profound societal implications, stressing these beliefs are far from harmless, how they can foster deep distrust, lead people down that slippery slope into other dangerous ideas.
And crucially, to be balanced, we acknowledged the valid criticisms of intelligence agencies, political motives, those initial technical questions that can genuinely fuel skepticism. Complex events do have messy realities that invite scrutiny. That doesn't automatically mean conspiracy. But then, we meticulously deconstructed the conspiratorial claims themselves. We drew on that wealth of expert analysis, from geopolitical accounts of intelligence failures and dysfunction to rigorous scientific and engineering explanations for the collapses, forensic reports, presenting a cohesive, non-conspiratorial account grounded in solid research and evidence.
We also touched on those fascinating sociological and cognitive reasons why these theories are just so appealing. How our brains can sometimes gravitate toward simple, satisfying stories, even if they lack evidence, maybe out of that fear of intellectual void Onfray talked about.
Yeah.
And as our source author, Maxence Cranford, reminded us with his own journey, understanding all this is a process, an intellectual grapple. The goal is to provide that rational, evidence-based foundation for your own ongoing reflection and critical thinking.
So here's a final thought perhaps for you, the listener. In this age where information is instant, overwhelming, often contested, how do you choose? How do you discern between genuine questions and valid critiques of system failures versus the seductive simplicity of an all-encompassing theory that might ultimately be unfounded?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
How do we, as individuals, as a society, cultivate the patience, the intellectual humility, the critical thinking skills needed to really engage with complex, uncomfortable truths, instead of just succumbing to the easy comfort of digestible fictions?
A vital question. We really encourage you to delve deeper. Explore the bibliography our source provides if you're interested. Keep asking questions. But always seek the most reasoned, evidence-based answers you can find.
That ultimately is what it means to be truly well-informed in our complex world.